So good afternoon, everyone, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you to the inaugural session of World Without GNE Myopathy's fourth annual conference. My name is Alok Bhattacharya, and I'm a trustee of WWGM. In this opening session, where we are lucky to have with us two very senior and eminent scientists. One is, of course, my father, Alok Bhattacharya, who's a professor of biology and head of department at Ashoka University and managing trustee of WWGM, who will be delivering the welcome address. And then we're also extremely honored to have with us Dr. Jyotsna Dhawan, who is an emeritus scientist at Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology and visiting professor at the Center for Stem Cell Science and Regenerative Medicine, who will speak about a very promising and ambitious collaborative project called the Myomission. And some of this Myomission will also be later discussed in Hindi in the evening session. So for those of you who are Hindi speaking, I will be keeping time for both speakers, so my apologies in advance if I do interrupt you. For the audience, please keep yourselves muted during the session unless you need to ask a question. And please raise your hands or put in the chat box any questions that you have that we can take up after the talks are over. So over to you, Baba.
Okay, thank you, Shilpi. Let me share my screen. Okay, so I'm going to talk about in a few minutes what our organization, World Without GNE Myopathy, have been doing. It's an organization working to find cure for GNE myopathy and other rare genetic disorders. So the WWGM in short was set up in June 2015 as a patient support and advocacy group. The mission is to generate awareness of GNE myopathy among patients globally, accelerate development of a therapy for GNE myopathy, which is our prime goal, make this available and accessible to all patients, and to provide support to patients for leading a fulfilling and safe life. As you can see that it's not sufficient to have the therapy, but one should make it also available to other patients, because that's something that we are seeing from that is coming out from other diseases. We have been, in fact, after 2015, ever since we have started working, there is a lot of awareness about this disease. We have organized a large number of different events. We have gone around talking about the disease, not only in colleges, universities, also among clinicians in Delhi, organized a meeting in Ahmedabad for neuroscientists. And we also sort of spoken about policy issues about this disease. And then, participated in things like semi-marathon or half marathon, etc. So essentially, all these activities have led to a great awareness of about GNE myopathy in India, not only among clinicians, also among scientists. What are the activities of WWGM? We maintain an informative website about the disease diagnosis, research efforts, activities, and policy. And you can see that this is a picture from one of the meetings that we organized, which is there in our website. So website, a lot of people have seen this website and they approach us after actually seeing things in the website. We organize patient day and scientific conferences every year. There is, starting from 2016, major events have been there. We managed to get large number of clinicians, scientists to come and talk about it, even if people are not working in this area, and also for people working on other diseases. And thankfully, we have been able to get experts from both India and abroad. Some of the top scientists who were involved in discovery of the disease were also able to come and attend our meetings in this. So this is the last year's meeting, that some of the pictures that I'll show you. Last year we organized with collaboration from CCMB, Professor Jyotsna Dhawan, and we organized a muscle and disease conference, and there are a large number of people participated in the meeting, and the meeting spread over 2 days. Very interesting discussion that followed. Almost everyone works on muscle in some form or other were present in it. And the major outcome that you will be hearing from Professor Dhawan is the initiation of Myomission project. We have supported research projects. 3 research projects or 3 groups have been supported. Narayan Nethralaya Foundation for an AAV vector development, you will be hearing about it. And also a stem cell kind of bank that we are supporting there. And a cellular model for GNE myopathy being supported at ICE at Tirupati. And these are all, the PIs of all these projects are some of the top scientists, young scientists of this country. We have been, our research work is coming out. We have managed to publish some papers, and also not only on GNE myopathy, but also on some of the policy initiative on this, on not only on GNE myopathy, but also on rare diseases in India. So we had one of the papers, this mutation spectrum of GNE myopathy. This is the one paper that actually talked about how the different mutations are there, and we identified a founder mutation which is present in the Indian subcontinent. We also tried to answer the question is that why mutation in GNE gene causes muscle defect, and did a large amount of bioinformatics and other analysis of that. Then the papers are about developing a policy and trying to talk about, what is the current knowledge in the country and what are the possibilities that we have. New activity Myomission that you will be hearing, so I won't actually talk about this. I want to mention here is that our funding comes from contribution from trustees, patients, and friends. And WWGN operates on a very shoestring budget with no overhead and salary expenses. And funding, whatever we do, goes collectively for activities of the WWGM. So we need to raise the level of a funding, and that's something that all of you have been participating, but we would like more effort towards this direction so that many of our activities, particularly research, which requires a lot of money, can be taken care of. Thank you very much.
Over to you, Professor Dhawan. Thank you, Baba.
Okay, I'll just start sharing my slides. Are you able to see my slides?
No.
No.
Not yet? Okay. Let me. Have I been made a co-host?
Yeah,
Yes.
you are a co-host.
Okay. Let me just try that again.
Otherwise, you have sent it, I can download and.
Now we
Okay.
can see.
You can see it now?
Yes.
Okay. Is it full screen?
Not yet.
Okay, let me just do that. All right. I think it's full screen now.
Yes.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much to Alok and Sudha and to Shilpi for giving me this opportunity to participate in this wonderful event this afternoon. I think it's becoming increasingly apparent that patients are a very critical part of an in-depth understanding of any disorder. And I mean, this is obviously something that should have been obvious to everybody forever, but it really is only recently that both the clinical and scientific world are taking notice of a point that patients have always known, right? And that is that their intrinsic experience of a disease can inform research just as keenly as an extrinsic investigation into its underlying causes. So it's really a privilege for me to participate in today's meeting where there are patients and their families present. So as Alok alluded to, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this Myomission, which is a new initiative, an integrated effort to try and work towards building an scientific and clinical and patient-oriented program to address challenges not only of living with muscle disorders, but also addressing them with research and therapy. So, all right. So I just want to take you a little bit through the biology. You all know that skeletal muscle comprises up to 40% of the human body, more for some of us than others. And so what that means is that if in the event of any muscle disease, any therapy has to be capable of distributing to this very large and extensive target tissue. So, right. So, there are a very, very large number of neuromuscular diseases that arise due to defects in aspects that affect the genes that affect functions of muscle. So I'm listing here a huge number of the diseases. Today's organization that we're working within is to do with GNE myopathy, but many of the issues are common to all the muscular diseases, the neuromuscular diseases. And that is that they are highly variable in their pattern of inheritance, the origin of the genetic mutation, whether it is inherited or whether it happens within the individual, the incidence, the symptoms, the age of onset, the rate of progression, and the eventual prognosis and outcome. So given that this is such a variable set of diseases, it is quite a challenge to address therapeutically. So, I'm just going to give two examples, and one is of the Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, of which there are a very large number of patients. You know that Duchenne muscular dystrophy is due to mutations in muscle proteins, in this particular case, dystrophin. But also there are many other types of related myopathies, which are due to defects in a complex of proteins that lie at the surface of the skeletal muscle membrane. So the fact is that these different mutations lead to different types of myopathies, which are expressed in different types of muscles. So understanding why that happens, even though the mutant gene is present everywhere, is therapeutically quite a challenge. So there are many ways in which one can address this. Can we reactivate the expression of the non-expressing gene? You need to know then what turns it on and off. Can we fix the mutant gene? For that, you need gene therapy, which means you have to deliver genetic material, which has its own challenges. Can we use drug molecules to prevent muscle degeneration? If that's the case, we need to know why muscle loss happens, right? So there are many challenges. Now, coming to GNE myopathy, of which most of you know probably much more than I do, the defective enzyme here is a bifunctional enzyme which adds sugar molecules to other proteins. Now, GNE patients have less of this, and so there's less of the modification. So you might think that an obvious therapeutic approach is simply to add back the missing sugar. And there are clinical trials ongoing, but somehow they doesn't seem to be as effective. So we have to ask, How does this defect lead to the pathophysiology of degeneration? And how do you find the targets which are actually upset and play a normal role in normal muscle? So all that requires both clinical and basic research. So World Without GNE Myopathy has been focused on patients started, with this idea. And I'm sorry, this was set up in 2017, but I realized from Alok's talk that it's set up earlier than that in 2015. And it has been there to promote awareness about GNE myopathy and has been conducting a variety of different activities. Now, one of the really important things about this patient-based organization is to create a new platform for patients, clinicians, scientists, regulators, and industry to actually engage effectively to address unmet needs. So one of the events that Alok also mentioned earlier was the fact that we had this meeting with a large group of participants, and it was astonishing to us that there are so many people in India who are working on muscle, both from a basic perspective, from clinicians, there are patient groups, pharmaceutical companies, and obviously you also need appropriate regulation. And what was really important for us is that Professor Vijay Raghavan, who's the principal scientific advisor, gave the plenary talk, and muscle is close to his heart because he's been working on muscle his whole life. And with implications for neuromuscular disorders. And he engaged with a very diverse online group. So from this, the major recommendation of the meeting was to actually integrate translational research and create a new program, which we call the Myomission. And this program is still in, being built. And we're hoping that we will be able to garner substantial funding towards these efforts. So let me just tell you a bit about what we plan to do. Okay. Yeah. So the Myomission really is to create this mission mode program to develop affordable therapies for neuromuscular diseases that are currently untreatable. Now, there are many challenges. We know that rare genetic disorders have not received sufficient attention from scientists or government agencies. The disease burden in India has not been sufficiently or extensively documented. The estimates suggest that there are a very large number of patients who are living with these disorders. But the treatment for 95% or more of these diseases are absolutely out of the reach of anybody, even when they are available, right? They are very expensive. And since the neuromuscular disorders constitute a very substantial fraction of these rare genetic diseases, they actually are involving 500 different genes or more. And so this poses a considerable challenge. So the Myomission has three broad goals, which have been based on identified scientific, technical, and clinical gaps. The first is to really enhance the capability in diagnosis, clinical management, and clinical research, including trials. The next is to try and develop drugs and therapies targeting these different diseases, which means that you have to have basic research to understand mechanisms. You have to generate model systems, and then you have to have effective drug discovery programs. You also need to develop the capability for manufacturing some of these, which in the case of cell and gene therapy also has the challenge of the fact that neither of these are approved for functioning, and therefore you need a whole regulatory framework. And I should add that this group is not the only one that is working towards it. There are other groupings. I mean, most importantly, the people at the Center for Stem Cell Research in Vellore, Christian Medical College, who have been working for 2 decades to try and bring some of these together, not in focusing on the muscular dystrophies, but really focusing on sickle cell anemia and other blood-based disorders. But many of the challenges are similar, and therefore it is important to realize that we can build on each other's experience. So the overall approach is to actually harness the capability that already exists in the country by creating a network of these research groups and clinical groups with complementary expertise, and to achieve goals through collaboration and sharing of resources. And I think the very important thing is to involve patient groups as one of the major stakeholders right from the beginning, which often has not been the case. So what will the Myomission work towards? We'll work towards patient services and information, towards creating I beg your pardon, towards creating clinical centers with comprehensive capability for diagnosis and patient management and clinical studies. Because one of the things that we realize is that we don't have good enough natural history studies or disease progression models in our country. We also need basic research and translational avenues. We need cell models for identifying disease targets. I beg your pardon. We need to be able to determine the efficacy of potential drug molecules. We also need to define a good preclinical and clinical path, identify and design therapeutic molecules, systems based on small molecules, gene therapy based on oligonucleotides, mRNAs, or editing. And eventually we need to get to the point of actually making these molecules and apply for limited patient trials. So an overview is just given in this, where we would like to start with understanding the biology of muscle diseases, generate cellular models, characterize their phenotypes, create models for testing potential drugs, and actually go through the testing process. In parallel, we also need to have the development of in silico and in vitro assays for effector molecule identification. We also need to develop viral vectors so that they can be brought together for future clinical trials. Simultaneously, we need the clinical centers to be working on natural history diagnosis and the developments of actual procedures for making these clinical trials possible. So here's just a list, a partial list actually, of the investigators and patient groups that are involved in the Myomission. So you can see it's fairly extensive, and it's going to be a challenge to manage and bring together everybody and make sure that people's participation is best integrated into this program. So I just want to end by saying, to come back to what I started with, which is, to say that people who are living with a variety of neuromuscular disorders do not have to be defined by their disease and only endure the sort of indignities that their condition has created. Rather, I think that they can be active participants in the quest for cures, as well as in dissemination of information that will help others in their position. So, I realize that this may not serve as much comfort to someone who's experiencing a very difficult situation on a day-to-day basis. But I hope it offers a means to also see your role, patients' role as equal partners in exploring and defining therapeutic strategies. So I'll stop here and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Dhawan. That was a very easy and it was, I think, very easy for laymen to understand as well, and a very good overall description of this very complex project, the Myomission initiative. So I see that there's a hand raised, Ashish, and if anyone has questions, so we have like 5 minutes for questions, so please put your questions in the chat box. Ashish, you can ask your question.
Thank you, ma'am, for that wonderful talk, which was accessible to laymen like me also. I had a question on therapeutics. Is the Myomission also looking at possible?
Can I request other participants to mute so that Mr. Ashish can ask his question. Thank you.
Thank you. So I was asking, is the Myomission and your research also focusing on using CRISPR-based therapeutics for myopathies and GNE myopathy in particular?
Yes. So one of the active sub components of the Myomission is gene therapies. And of course, gene therapies come in multiple different forms, right? So one would be to actually deliver the therapeutic gene to overcome the original defect. Those are faced with many challenges because delivering a whole gene is quite difficult. Although the recent mRNA-based therapeutics, which has now been clinically trialed all over the world because of Corona, seems to be a good alternative. But you talked about CRISPR, which is essentially genome editing. And we are lucky actually to have 2-3 groups in the country. One of the most outstanding young groups is that of Debjyoti Chakravarti and Sauvik Maiti at IGIB in Delhi. And they have developed new CRISPR-based molecules, which they hope to be able to deploy in multiple different types of diseases, not just the neuromuscular disorders, but also in clotting disorders and hemoglobinopathies. So, but this work is still at an early stage. They are doing active research, but their idea is very much towards developing this towards neuromuscular genome editing. So,
thank you. And while doing any kind of gene therapy, we have to be mindful of off-target effects, right? That it is,
yes,
like it might cure the gene, the faulty gene in question, but
yes,
it should not cause other damage to unrelated parts of the genome, right?
That's right. That's one of the most critical aspects. And that assumes also that one is able to deliver the therapeutic molecule very effectively, right? So even if you cross all the challenges of delivering these therapeutic strategies to the patient, or you start of course with cell models, then and with animal models, and only then you go to patients. So one of the things that Debjyoti and his group have done is to actually do their research on a new type of CRISPR molecule, which they find has fewer off-target effects. And so that's quite an interesting advance in the field. So they are making sure that they can minimize the off-target effects as much as possible. Now, you would realize that there is no drug that we know today, whether it's a small molecule or any kind of drug, that doesn't have off-target effects, right? So what the clinical world works towards is to